Same old, same old.
Naki's not here to say what's up, but you're like a co-host. You're on our show enough that you can just you could probably do the introduction. But for those of you that don't know, welcome to KOVIKI Talk. KOVIKI Talk is a multi-episode series where we talk about all things COVID-19, but from the Pacific Islander perspective. So we have Pacific Islander community leaders, CBO organizers, doctors, and influential members of the PI community on to talk about timely, accurate, and that's most important, accurate COVID-19 information. We're doing the regional tour, and today we're not actually in the great state of Hawaii. I wish I were actually in Hawaii, but we are going to talk about Hawaii's data, and we have officials and people that are boots on the ground, as we like to call them, people that are deeply embedded in the community. I'm going to start with Dr. Robert Gadanet. I'm sorry, Robert Gadanet. Naki was going to do this introduction, so I'm stumbling here a little bit. Robert's been in the social service field for over 25 years. He earned a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Hawaii at Manoa and his Master's of Science in Counseling Psychology from Chaminade University. Robert has worked as a mental health case manager for North Shore Mental Health. He has also worked as a lead case manager in the COVID quarantine hotel. That's what it says. We'll get to that. We'll figure that out. Welcome, Robert. It says the COVID quarantine hotel. Next, we have Dr. Joseph Jalkanin. Dr. Joseph graduated from the University of Hawaii at Manoa in 2018. He completed his residency training in emergency medicine from the University of Texas Health San Antonio. He works in San Antonio as an ER physician. Dr. Jalkanin is a happy doctor, and we'll talk about the happy organization later in the show. Welcome, Dr. Joseph.
Thank you.
And we have Dr. David DeRalph. And he is a MD and a Master's in Public Health. He's the Executive Director of the Kokua Kalihi Valley. Dr. DeRalph has been with KKV for 30 years. In 1989, he was hired as KKV's first clinical director and remained in this position until being named as KKV's Executive Director in 2003. Dr. DeRalph worked from 1987 to 1988 as the Assistant Director of Public Health in the Thai Highland Project on the border of Thailand and Burma. He is board certified in general preventive medicine. Dr. DeRalph has, hold on a second here. I'm introducing somebody who's not here.
Right. I don't think he's logged on yet.
Okay. We'll get with Dr. DeRalph when he comes on. Let's see. So Naki left a icebreaker question. She would usually be asking this. So if you had a time machine, which historical event would you like to go back and witness? And there's no time frame on this. Sometimes Naki will give a heads up and give you a little bit of time to think. I can see Dr. Joseph looking at the screen like, what? So Dr. Reno Samoa, if you had a time machine and you could go back and witness a historical event, any event, which event would that be?
I think mine is a toss-up. I think it would definitely be the I Have a Dream speech. At the Washington Memorial or Washington Monument. That, and I think it would be the night they made the decision on the charter for the independent state of Samoa. When it became an independent country. I think probably those two events I would love to see. That and when the Seahawks won the Super Bowl again. I think those are the three.
Oh, that's right. You're a Seahawks. It's hard to not pick that. I Have a Dream, right? So powerful and a big piece of our history. Dr. Jalkanin Joseph, how about you? Have you haven't had any thought of any historical event that you'd want to go back in time and see?
That's a very good question. I'm sorry. I think my there's something wrong with my speaker, so I'm not really sure if I'm too loud. But basically, for me, oh, that's I've never really thought about it. But if I have to, um, I'm not. I would love to go back and talk to the chief of the Marshallese Island, the one that actually talked to the U.S. Navy captain that convinced him that they can do nuclear testing in the Marshall Islands. And I'll probably tell him, don't trust the white man because it's not in your best interest. And we'll probably avoid the entire nuclear testing in the Marshall Island, which is the reason why there's a lot of poverty right now and healthcare disparities. So if I have to, I'll probably go back and say, Chief, stick to your guns and protect your people, things like that.
Yeah, and I don't think that's a piece of history that's taught. Like a lot of people don't know where the testing was done, and the circumstances around that. So big piece of history. Robert, how about you? If you had your '85 DeLorean and you could go back to any time in the past.
Uh, I would go back when Bitcoin came out, because then I can help a lot of people with that Bitcoin, especially people from my homeland of American Samoa. Yeah, that would be Bitcoin, and then probably when Microsoft came out, invest in that. 'Cause we all know that the power of the dollar can help a lot of people if it's in the right hands.
That's true. That's true. So you got Google, you got Microsoft, you got Bitcoin. I think it's at 65,000 right now. So definitely you could make some good moves there. If I could go back in time, I think and it's not like one event, but when the Pacific Islanders made the navigation from, I mean, far stretches, like when they landed in Hawaii or they landed in the different islands, just following the Hokulea's path and journey with the navigators and seeing what they've done, I'd like to see the navigation or the settling of the Pacific from our ancestors. Of course, that's not one point in time. That's a whole bunch of points in time. But if I had to actually pick a date, I think I would go with the "I Have a Dream" speech. I mean, we've all seen it and heard it, and it's been quoted so many different times. And what a big moment in human history for human rights. So Naki's still not here to pick up the pace with the icebreaker question, but I think we'll move on. So what we've been doing is we've been going through different parts of the country and going over data from I think it was called the needs assessment, where we Pacific Islanders went out and got our own data, went out and polled our own people and got information. And I think that's key as we go forward, that we're not asking for things. We're not asking for data, for disaggregating data and those kind of things. We always are going to be asking that. But now we're actually going out and getting the word from our own people and getting the information directly from them. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Samoa, and if you want to lead us through the slides and the data, and then we can just break into the discussion after that.
Will do, will do. So getting data that's disaggregated is really tough for our communities. So the fact that we were able to do it, I think was really important. But data is only good as it pertains to our real life experiences. And so the context is really important. And so that's why it's really important to have Rob and Joseph here to sort of help us understand how much of this data is consistent with the realistic experience of Pacific Islanders in Hawaii. So with that said, let me pull up. Give me one sec. I'm trying to share screen. Okay. Tell me if you see it, yeah? Do you see the screen?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay, give me one sec. Okay. How about now?
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so the AAPA survey was a national survey commissioned by Congress, funded by the Urban League, and we were able to field about a little over 1,200 responses across the nation, and predominantly there were states that had a fair amount of Pacific Islanders in the census, Hawaii being one of them. And we got about 139 respondents from Hawaii, predominantly Samoan. The Native Hawaiian survey was actually conducted by the Indigenous Research Wellness Institute in Hawaii. I'm sorry, in the University of Washington. So we specifically just aimed to survey Pacific Islanders. And so the Hawaii survey came back predominantly Samoan, with a spattering of other Pacific Islanders. The zip code breakdown. So I'm not super familiar with Hawaii's zip code breakdown. So as you can see, I mapped it on top of the COVID case reports or case incidences. And as you can see, the deeper red is where there's a higher concentration of COVID cases. And so, Rob and Joseph, you guys probably know the terrain better than I do, and it can comment a little bit later on some of these hot spots. And as you can see, area code 96797 had a fair amount of respondents, but they areas like 96819 had a high amount of hesitancy. And so I don't know where that corresponds to on the map, but we can talk about that in a little bit. So when we broke down sort of behavioral conditions in Hawaii, luckily there was not a lot of people that reported that not all of them, not all, we didn't have a lot of people who reported not wearing masks. Predominantly, most of the people that responded to the survey wore masks all the time, with a fair amount of them being open to getting the vaccine. And so that's kind of what makes me think that our survey is a little bit skewed. There was a high amount of recruitment from University of Hawaii, and so that might have influenced the responses. Just like almost in all the other states, the predominance of the respondents were female, and it didn't seem to make that big of a difference, with about a quarter being hesitant in either gender. When we looked at vaccine hesitancy based on educational attainment, we didn't see what we saw in other states. In almost all the other states, there was a predominance of the lower your educational attainment, the higher your hesitancy to get the vaccine. And as you can see here, there is kind of a break between AA and technical degree and those with college degrees, in that it's a lot lower in undergraduate and graduate degrees compared to all other levels of education. But you don't see sort of the stepwise approach like we do in all the other states. In California, high school graduates had 89% vaccine hesitancy. And on the income level, sort of the same thing. We see sort of an equal kind of breakdown with less being up in the higher income. There is a higher predominance of vaccine hesitancy in lower income, which is kind of consistent with what we see in the other states. And then the breakdown of essential workers versus non-essential workers, they seem to have the same amount of vaccine hesitancy. Although the stories may be different, and so we'll tap Rob's experience with some of these smaller subgroups and their hesitancy to get the vaccine. Um, this is something I'm kind of very interested in. It's seeing the ability to see a provider. And so, as you can see, there wasn't um, the difficulty in seeing the provider didn't really have that big of an influence on vaccine hesitancy, except it's a little bit more equal before the pandemic, that it was difficult for them to see. You see about equal numbers of hesitancy versus receptiveness. And then during the pandemic, um, uh, you don't see the vaccine hesitancy rise significantly, although the numbers during the pandemic definitely overall in aggregate shows that everyone, like almost all Pacific Island, 2/3 of Pacific Islanders had difficulty seeing their provider, with the biggest reason being the transition to telemedicine. And then this is sort of more of the breakdown of behaviors. Luckily, you see for the most part people social distancing and wearing face masks, which is always a positive sign. This is the isolation. Uh, uh, what people do once they've been exposed. And so, uh, uh, luckily, this may have changed because the numbers in April when we tested weren't as high as they are after April and now. So this may be completely different. The number of responses we would get to those who've been exposed to COVID. Um, and luckily for the most part, people have been exercising uh, positive behaviors in regards to isolation. But luckily, we have Rob to sort of tell us more in depth about that experience. And then, sort of a breakdown of food security. Um, uh, it seems like, at least from Hawaii's standpoint and the respondents, that food security seems to be somewhat intact and didn't seem to drive vaccine hesitancy too much, although our numbers are small, um, uh, and they skew the results. And so that's it. Let me see. That's the data from the AAPA survey. And so, uh, Rob, can you sort of go over what your experience has been stepwise up since you've had a lot of experience with the quarantine and the whole, and transitioning people to safe quarantine? You're on mute, Rob.
Yeah, the Hawaii has a program where they call the access line, which is like a crisis hotline, and then they screen these individuals who need quarantine or isolation, and then they bring them to the hotel. And then it started back last year around, let's say, probably August, and people weren't aware how to get into the hotel at that time. But slowly through media campaigns and stuff like that, more people got access to these hotels, and a lot of Polynesian people started using these as ways to get away out of the multi-family dwellings, right? For example, there'll be like a Samoan family that lives with their grandparents. The grandparents were tested negative, but they tested positive. Then the other family was able to use the hotel to get quarantined. And then towards the in around March, when the numbers in Hawaii got a little low, they closed the hotels because we weren't seeing the numbers rising, and then an influx of numbers went up higher. Then they reopened it in May, and then in May they opened the smaller hotels, and then just recently, a couple months ago, they opened the big hotel in Waikiki, the one that has over 100 something rooms. But then the numbers dropped again just recently, and that sort of not see that much family people coming in. But there is a lot of Polynesian people that use these services, but they needed to be aware of these services first and how to access them first, and then now they use them. So it's in Hawaii. There's a big hesitant on getting vaccinated, but some people will say, "Oh, my brother, sister, all of them got vaccinated, but I didn't," and then we wonder why. We ask them, "Why didn't you want to get vaccinated?" And a lot of them refer back to internet misinformation. So a lot of these people are just getting misinformation, and that's the reason why they didn't until it was too late that they got COVID. So that's I don't know how is it in the mainland, but in Hawaii there's a lot of, because we're so isolated from the mainland. A lot of our news is either from the internet, and some of that information is not really exactly creditable. So that's the reason why I think the numbers went up. The spike in numbers went up, but then slowly the real information came out. People were able to access better information, and then now I think Hawaii is at 69 point something percent vaccinated. So things are being opened up. More mandates have been dropped, but yeah. So I think for me, the vaccinations played a big part in Hawaii's recovery economically, I think.
Hey, Robert, can you talk a little bit about the quarantine hotel? Like, how did that get started? Was the community pushing for that, or was it a state health program? So, how did that come to be when it first started?
Well, that would be Dr. Samo's really good friend, our lieutenant governor. He, I think he played a big part in finding ways to have Hawaii have a quarantine place because of. I think he realizes, because he's from here, he realizes that there's so much multi-family homes in Hawaii, and then I think if there was a way to separate the people who are infected from those who are not, can slow down the process. And I think by having that, it actually did slow our numbers down. But then people got complacent, got misinformation, and then it boomed again. The second boom with the Delta variant came out, and we all know it's more highly contagious than the one that came before it. So
Right. Welcome, Naki.
Hi, Naki.
Sorry I'm late.
You're right on time.
Okay, cool. I'm right on time in the Pacific Islander time clock.
We're talking about the Hawaii data, and Robert was
Yes, I've been
talking about
listening.
the
And
quarantine
I'm with
hotel.
Rob with the Bitcoin. That's where I would go back in time. And
yes,
Starbucks, I would buy stock in Starbucks. There you go. Had to get my 2 cents in.
Dr. Joseph, is there any data that you saw on the slides? A lot of times the information comes out after we do surveys or we do like needs assessments, and it kind of confirms what we already thought. Was there anything in there when Dr. Samuel was going through the slides that kind of surprised you when he was going through the data, or was it all kind of confirming things that you kind of already knew?
Oh, you're on
I
mute.
think you're on mute.
Um, I think it looks like I'm very surprised that we were able to get that much data. but I think it kind of like just shows what we already know so far, from the hesitancy all the way to, I mean, reason why people don't want to get the vaccine and all of that. So I think it's we. I wish we have more data to aggregate, but um, as expected, we don't we don't want to push them to participate because it might scoot the data more. So I'm just glad that people are participating.
Joseph, what's the experience like in the ER with currently?
Currently here in for me, so I live in San Antonio, but actually I had to drive 2 hours to work in Laredo, which is a border town here in Texas. So we were one of the hot spots here. Um, but it looks like we've been um, our numbers are going down. Laredo, it's a smaller community, but percentage wise, our number was like higher than a lot of major cities in Texas. But our numbers are going down, and it correlates with the vaccination effort too as well. I can clearly see that um, I work in a different many different like I think I work in like four different hospital settings in Laredo and have like some part-time jobs in San Antonio and a couple of PRN jobs close to Houston. So it all depends on where I'm working. So in Laredo, where I'm working, the majority of the patient population are like Hispanic patient, Mexicans, and you can tell that we did a very good job campaign wise in getting the truth out there about the vaccine, because once we start pushing like the vaccine information to the Hispanic community, their number actually went up significantly. For example, right now, if I see a patient in the ER in Laredo, if I ask them if they're vaccinated, I would say majority of them will say yes, and they are vaccinated. But if I have to work at my other places, where it's mostly the population is non-Latino or Mexican and predominantly Caucasian, their numbers are still the same to me. Their I'm, their hesitancy is kind of complex. I'm not really sure why they're persistently don't want to get the vaccine, but these are people that I would consider highly educated people with a strong political view system. So I suspect that is playing a role. But I think what I'm saying is that I can kind of extrapolate the data here as being for because I kind of the patient population in Laredo is kind of similar to Pacific Islanders, I would say. Majority indigent folks that doesn't really go to the hospital until they are sick. Um, but the good thing in my experience, it looks like they're more receptive in this case. So I think, and I can kind of maybe make a parallel comparison to uh, Pacific Islander patient or Micronesians, I would say. I could be wrong, but that's what I believe in. But so far, I think in Texas in general, our numbers are in going down. The state is actually doing a lot of positive things that are helping out. For example, they set up these infusion centers throughout the states, and San Antonio is one of the infusion centers, and Laredo is the other one as well too. So I'm sending patients all the time to these infusion centers to get the monoclonal antibody Regeneron, and if they need to be admitted to the hospital, now we have actually beds in the hospital available. But a couple months ago, we were hitting a very high threshold of admission, so we had to improvise on some of the things that we're doing here in the emergency department.
Um, Doctor, do you have the mandate there for like here in California? A lot of the companies, lots of the companies, were like where I work. It's mandated that we're vaccinated. Is that? Can you say that in Texas, or does it depend? Or I'm
I
curious.
No, no, I that's a I think well, let me first of all let me just say that I like I would like everybody to get vaccinated,
Right.
but I think forcing the vaccine on people is not the right way to do things. I mean, I think we're Americans and we have the right to make dumb, stupid decisions. And
Right.
sometimes if it costs you your life, then that's your problem. So the mandating the vaccine, I don't quite agree with it. but I wanted everybody to get the vaccine on their own free will.
Right.
And
So
this is,
there's not a mandate in Texas like there is here in California.
I think there's some mandate with some private companies,
Okay.
but the governor is pretty strict. They're very firm on their political view that they
Right.
do not want to mandate their vaccine, and that's like the big dilemma here in Texas. The governor is very conservative.
Right.
He will follow his political beliefs, even though if he has the data, which most of the time he has the right data, he just doesn't want to do it. But on the upside is that we have leaders in these smaller cities or major cities, such as San Antonio. The mayor is pretty aggressive, liberal, and sometimes they butt it all the time, and they ended up suing each other. So their political battle plays out in the not only in the public realm but also in the judicial system as well. But I think that's what makes Texas a little bit different, because
Right.
even though we're traditionally known as a conservative state, we do have some pockets of real democratic, I would say liberal Democrats that are constantly giving the governor his fair share of challenges, which I'm glad.
Right.
Yeah, that Abbott has been really controversial in the way, and it seems like Texas kind of handled like a miniature United States. Like he lifted the mask mandate statewide before the other states did that. But then, like you're saying, there's small Austin, San Antonio. There's smaller municipalities that do things completely different. The numbers are coming down, but you're still saying that from what you're seeing, that's in correlation to the vaccination rate. Like they still tie to each other.
Absolutely, absolutely. You can tell that the like for example, I would say maybe like 2 months ago, our numbers were very high COVID wise, and then but our vaccination rate at the time is it's not the way it should be. But as you can see, we're as our numbers for vaccination starting to rise, the admissions rate actually goes down, correlates with the national data as well too. So there's no doubt people are putting two and two together and say, hey, the vaccine works.
Mhm.
I still have to spend a lot of time with patients to tell them like, and this is where I do the real talk. I'm like, listen, I don't really care about your political ideology. I'm just telling you as an ER doctor, somebody that actually take care of really sick patients, that the vaccine works. And if you can, please get it. Like that's it. I don't want to hear anything else. I'm just telling you that what I'm supposed to tell you. Because I mean, I think people are making a very they're basically gambling with their life with inappropriate data. So it's
Right.
our job to tell them the truth and to try to convince them to get the vaccine. But I'm sad to say that we're losing that battle through like all these misinformation
Misinformation.
everywhere. So
Correct.
we're losing. We need to step up our campaign
Mm.
uh, and convince people to get the vaccine. But I don't think we should mandate it, because then people will just push those people away. And some people already make up their mind. They're not going to get vaccine. They will not get it. And we
Um,
just have to learn how to live with that.
Thank you, Robert. It is, and I might have missed it because I'm PI late. But is Hawaii? Does Hawaii have a mandate? Do you know?
I know there was a mandate that came up for government workers. Like for the DOE, there was a mandate for people to get vaccinated, and I think the police department, um, more government wise, and I know some like private companies, they doing it on their own. Telling the employees that they need to. I think some like a lot of the restaurants want that mandate
Uh-huh.
for their employees because they want to be open. They want to start making some money.
Right.
Yeah, Hawaii has been strong on trying to push the issue on the mandate, but I agree with the doctor from San Antonio that yeah, it's
Mhm.
I think it's a right. I mean, it's a choice, a free choice to make if you want to get vaccinated. But again, um, sometimes that choice, people make decisions that affect others,
Right.
and I think that's the reason why the government stepped in because Hawaii is a very strong Democrat state,
Yeah.
and it's going to be that way for a long, long time. The Democrats here are, is it's rooted um, in the fabric of politics in Hawaii.
Right.
I mean, to even have a governor that became governor years ago as a Republican, that was an odd thing to happen, but that never happened again after that. So yeah, but it has increased the level of vaccinations all the way up to 69%. And I notice every time like, when they push that, our numbers get lower. So I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I know it's not too taxing on us medical providers out there because I think they want the vaccinations to happen so they don't burn out. It just happens, and I agree with it sometimes, and I don't. I'm on the fence.
There's a question in the chat for Robert. It comes from Lily Felice Tawese. When you speak of the hotels in Hawaii that are these also the ones that when traveling from the mainland you would have to quarantine at? Also, is this paid by the traveler or by the government?
The ones that are set up by the state is only for the residents of the state.
Mm.
The traveling stuff, no, you gotta pass through the screening process. Uh, and Hawaii changes it so much that right now I lost track on the testing or vaccination passports that we were working on. So, but the quarantine hotels that we have now is mainly for the residents.
Mhm.
You didn't. So when I traveled recently, they you didn't have to quarantine if you had proof of your vaccine.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. What about the restaurant? Are there's some restaurant mandates now? Yeah, Robert, Rob.
Yeah, there are. Just recently they changed it again, but the week before last, you need to show proof of a vaccination card to sit down process in Hawaii. If you weren't, then you just were allowed to do the takeout thing. So, but again, it's changed 99 in Hawaii because the numbers are getting lower and our vaccination rates are getting higher. So I think they based a lot of their decisions on like the herd immunity theory. So if we can get to a certain number, they'll open it up more. So that's currently that's where we stand right now at 69.6% or something like that.
Looks like
And I
Lily's
think
asking. Well, when you say screening process, what does that cover?
oh
Uh,
that's when because I know when I went to go visit family in Vegas in April, um not April, but in July, the vaccination cards were like our passport. We just need to check in with Hawaiian Air. They give you that little uh, they give you that little bracelet after you download to the state's page that you got vaccinated. You show you show proof of your card, of your vaccination card. But then when I traveled in April, uh, we even though we were vaccinated, we still needed to show uh, proof of a test, a negative test, and then we didn't have to quarantine. So
hmm,
because we get so much traffic that comes in from the mainland, Asia, in Hawaii, and it changes a lot because Hawaii is we are so dependent on tourism that we don't want to close it down. So mandates and different policies are always changing,
right.
and
Yeah, because when
this
I
this
was there in August, and I didn't need to test. I just needed to upload my card. So the best advice I think for Lily is to go to the website because, like Rob said, it changes very frequently. And for you to get sort of the latest update as regards to the travel requirements of Hawaii, they update the website pretty frequently. Um, I don't know. Maybe we can post that to the PBD site.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yep.
the what is it, Rob? I forgot the name of the website, but it's the one that you have to log in and have an account on before you travel to Hawaii. So that's probably really, really important. If you're thinking about traveling to Hawaii, you should definitely check out the website first. And then, real quick, to Dr. Joe's point, in regards to sort of political leanings and the vaccine hesitancy. So the survey showed that when you're in red states, the vaccination hesitancy is going to be high. So in Arkansas, the vaccine hesitancy was about 71%, and in Utah, it was 69%. In Washington and Oregon, the vaccine hesitancy was around 25 to 29%. Um, that's not saying that blue states are better, because if you break down those responses, the same thing happens. The less you make and the less educated you are, even if you're in a blue state, the more hesitant you're going to be to get the vaccine. Um, so the trick that we have to figure out is, we know that if you make decent money and if you have a college degree and are educated, most likely you're going to be fine. The problem is, our people aren't going to, we're not going to reach that tomorrow, right? And so we have to figure out how to make up the gap while we try to close the gap. And I think that's why we have like shows like KOVIKI Talk, to try to dispel the misinformation. Um, you know, I I'm all for mandates, because there's still choice in that, right? You can choose to, the mandates to me speak to the science of people trying to keep their workforce healthy. Um, and so you can choose to work in that environment that's trying to keep people healthy, or you can choose not to. I don't blame them for going that route. I don't, I do feel sorry for people who have to make that choice, but knowing how many people have died from COVID, and knowing how disproportionately impacted Pacific Islanders are, I that's why I drive in that direction. Um, but I understand the hesitancy to say that outright. Um, I just don't see us beating this
Yeah.
until we take a stronger stance, right? And you're gonna get people all the time tell us, like, as physicians, we're asked 100 times over the pandemic, how come you still get it if you get vaccinated? And we answer these questions over and over again. We answer the question, why people get hospitalized even when they get vaccinated, the side effects of the vaccine, and the reality. And even with all that, even with our brown faces telling, what we our expert opinion on the science that's available, you still have people that disagree with us. That really have never seen anything about a vaccine until this year. And so it's frustrating, but it's there is no reason for us to call ourselves a Pacific Island community if we don't continue to advocate, even for those who disagree with us.
I think a good foundation for that is exactly what Dr. Jalkanin talked about, is that the blue or red, like he's in a red state, but the case rate is following the vaccination rate inversely. Like so it doesn't really matter what state you're in or what you're doing. If you're getting that the population is getting vaccinated, the case rate's going down. It doesn't really matter how they vote. If I heard him correctly.
Right. And I think
Um,
getting the accurate information, like accurate information, and I mean our numbers, Pacific Islander numbers. Like the numbers you see on TV, those aren't our numbers. Those aren't PI numbers, you know what I mean? And we're forced to go and to segregate our own numbers to get our true numbers. So the numbers that, and I get that a lot of us, we watch TV and take numbers that don't pertain to us. That's what I'm trying. Numbers that don't pertain to us is where we get misinformed. Because
Right. But there's willing, it's a real struggle. You have Rob, and Rob is working ridiculous hours. Like when Hawaii broke in, what was it, Rob? End of August, was early August till September, right? When Hawaii numbers were going up.
Yeah, it was early August, and then in October, November, it kept on going up, and then uh, December. Then when Hawaii got their vaccination shots available to them during December last year, and then once the shots came in, then that's when our numbers started dropping, and then that's when the hotels closed in March because the numbers were low. But then after that, things happened. People
Right.
got too comfortable.
yeah.
And then at one time at the hotel, speaking of the Polynesian people, there was a running joke at the hotel that I was related to everybody at the hotel because there was so much Polynesian Pacific Islander people there. And there were barriers that we had to overcome, language barriers so we had to get stuff printed out to, because when we go there, we ask them about their symptoms. So we have to point to these things. Or do you have body aches? And then like some of the people, the older people that couldn't speak English, they would say that they will point to it. But then there was all hurdles that we had to overcome. But at one time, there's a running joke. Hey, Rob, your uncle them just checked in, and then as I would say,
Rob,
probably you never know.
your uncle did check in, remember?
Boy, well, a couple
So
uncles did check in.
let me tell you this story real quick. Our uncle, well, okay, I'm
Don't
not
throw
going to
anybody under the bus. Don't throw anybody under the bus.
So we have somebody in our family that was hospitalized, like critically almost, with COVID, and came out of it, survived. Like, luckily Rob was there to assist with the transition from the hotel to the hospital, and then back home. And still doesn't want to get vaccinated. Like, we have thrown every logical argument, like I'm a physician, Rob has hands-on experience with his work over there in Hawaii. And even with all of that, obstinate, like completely, not even I'm not gonna get vaccinated. I'm gonna travel and I'm gonna go to all these events where no one wears masks. And it's I think that's the struggle. It's something we're gonna have to figure out how to, like, what messaging are we going to have to put together
Yeah.
to reach, because it's not like we it's somebody in Tennessee that we don't care about, right? Like, the argument is right in front of our face, in our doors, and if something happens to them, we can't say, "Oh, that's what you get."
Yeah.
It hurts us. It's a loss to our entire family, and yet, what are we going to do?
Well,
Doctor.
I got him to look into the vaccination because I told him I was going to buy him lunch.
And how did that go?
Lunch came after that. He said yes.
Oh, nice.
So the carrot was, since this is a Pacific Islander guy, heavy on the starches like taro, that kind of stuff. You know what? There's breadfruit. I have a breadfruit tree. You want some breadfruit? Let's go get the vaccination, right? So it's just how it is. I have tons of Micronesian friends that come Pikulu. I told them you cannot come in until you're vaccinated. So but it's a joking stuff. But I think they realize that I'm not playing around when I say, I don't want you to go in my backyard because you're not vaccinated.
Dr.
But if you
Joseph,
do that,
did a lot of the people, the rumor, right, and what we hear on Facebook, is that people that haven't been vaccinated, when they go into the hospital because they have severe symptoms, is that they don't come out, or there's a high percentage of that they don't come out. And then, like you said, somebody came out and still hesitant to take the vaccine. um, is there do we have data on that? I mean, is that a true statement, that if you haven't gotten vaccinated, that the chances of you not making it or is high as compared to if you were vaccinated?
You know what? Absolutely, we do have data. I just don't have it with me today, but there is actually, it's been shown. So I think the most important thing is also always think about COVID. What we don't want is the severe form of COVID. I mean,
Right.
which is what, if you're not vaccinated, there's a good chance that you'll get the severe form, even with the new variant. But if you're vaccinated, then there's a good chance, probably like 95 to 99%, that you won't get to that severe COVID, which is the most important thing. But I think at the when the new Delta variant came about, there were some numbers of fully vaccinated folks who were getting really, really sick. But I think it's not that many that would scoot the data. But still, even with all the three vaccine, I think like 4 or 5 now vaccines,
Mhm.
it's still uh, we can just tell that it's if you're vaccinated. You don't know how it makes me happy when I ask folks, Are you vaccinated?" Um, if they said yes, I am so happy. It's not that I'm going to change the way I treat the patient,
Right.
but it just makes me feel like, you know what, it looks like you care about yourself, and
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
But there's still, this is the most interesting thing that I've been facing probably for the past month or so. Folks who didn't get vaccinated and
Mhm.
end up getting admitted to the hospital, because that's the time that you get, like, I asked them like, hey, how come you didn't get the vaccine? And a lot of them will just give me this like, oh, I'm actually just waiting. That's like the number one answer I used to
Me
get.
too. I hear that too, and I'm
I'm
like,
I'm
what are you
waiting for
waiting
my
for?
update. Yeah, but I'm like, and I would give them the talk. I'm like, if you know what you know now, would you get the vaccine? Almost everybody say absolutely yes, I would get the vaccine. Because here you go, you're about to go into the hospital, needing oxygen, which is one of the most, like, that's one of the things that I don't want to get to,
Mhm.
the to a point where you're needing oxygen, because
Right.
it's just an anxiety provoking sensation. You're like, man,
Yeah.
I need this thing now. But anyways, people will risk their life to get to that point without knowing the real data, and
Yeah.
it's unfortunate that
It,
it became so politicized at the
Right.
beginning that we're just seeing the ramification now. And yeah.
it's
But I would say,
crazy. It's crazy how people the wait. I want to wait, right? Like
yeah,
I don't know. I wasn't around when smallpox vaccines came out and polio vaccines came out. Like you didn't have people saying, "I want to wait 10 years to see what the long term data is." It's those things were. It seems to be like it's like now they're putting a different framework onto a vaccine that wasn't on other vaccines before, but because it's politicized, it's that way. I did want to ask in the slides that Dr. Samuel had gone over. One of the zip codes, and if I remember it right, it was 96819 in Hawaii. And so punched it in, and I used to live in that zip code because, of course, it wasn't. It was like, oh, of course, Kalihi Kai, Kalihi Valley is in
Yeah.
96819, right? So when I looked at that, and then I was like, let me just check and make sure that was the one that Dr. Samuel put up. But with that in mind, the two that have the most experience in Hawaii, um, what is that? Is that confirming to you, or is it eye opening, or just kind of something you went, oh yeah, I could have told you that?
yes, that's the highest population of housing projects. That's Camphor housing, KPT housing, Mayor Rights housing. All of those big housing projects are it lays in Kalihi. And then those are the ones that have those cell phones. They get those misinformations from Facebook. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's the it's a heavy it's a big population of Polynesian people. A lot of immigrants moved there first. Out of all the places, they moved to Kalihi first. Then they migrate into other communities. But Kalihi, that is the Kalihi zip code. Ray knows you know it. He went to school there.
I went to school. We used to live there. Remember?
My husband
Yes.
lived there.
I was. Yeah. No. Yeah. Rob and I went to school there. Yeah. No. It fits with that socioeconomic health gradient, right? Like, of course, that would be the group that's most vulnerable to misinformation and be hesitant towards the vaccine. It's one of those things too that if you're not connected, there's not a lot of opportunity when you don't have a lot of money and you don't have a lot of educational resources to fall back on. And so, if you're not connected, you're going to just listen to anything, right? Anything that tells you something other than your reality. And kind of where I see it popping up in the medical field is if I tell you eating healthier and exercising helps you prevent diabetes, it'll work for people who make enough money and are educated enough to understand the benefits. But for people who aren't, they want supplements, right? They keep asking me like, what about this drink? What about this? I hear this like
Quick
cures
fix.
diabetes, a quick fix, right? And so that's kind of what's going on here with COVID. Like, no, I don't want the vaccine. I want something else because like I don't want to live in this reality, right? And so right now people are talking about ivermectin, and I don't know how many times like people have come up to me like, oh, does ivermectin work? Yes, for worms. It works for worms, for tapeworms, and I'm like, I ain't never seen someone with a tapeworm because
For cattle with worms.
well, no, we use it for worms, like for parasites, and so it has its place, but it's one of those like somebody tells somebody else and then they catch wind of it, even though it has because people keep sending me they kept posting on like different feeds like studies of ivermectin, and then you open the study and you look and it's just a NIH posting. All it's saying is that there was a study done. But then when you look into the study, you realize it was closed because they didn't find any benefit. These people are like they keep sharing links and they're useless. Like I'm like, this doesn't prove the point you're talking about. Like right now, Joe Rogan did an interview with Sanjay Gupta from CNN, and he posted this article to him that shows like in boys, like teenage boys or young adult boys or young adult men, that there's a higher risk of myositis or myocarditis with the vaccine. And then you open the article that it's not even peer reviewed. It's not even published. Like it's in its pre phase, like it's getting submitted to get published. I don't know who would publish it. It's a horrible paper. Like there's not a strong control group. They don't have very strong outcomes. They just sort of cherry pick kind of they use what they call a troponin, which is a sign of a heart attack. It's one of our signs of heart damage. But that's all it does. Like all they did was like sort of pick that number out without context. And they don't really sort of show what's controlled it against or what the outcome is. Like there is no validation of what those numbers are. And so, these things that keep getting promulgated, published, people are accepting as like their Bible's truth. and then you look into it and you're like, this is nothing. I don't know what you're trying to like prove with this, because this proves, just because it's in the title doesn't
Right.
mean anything.
We had to research, and I think everybody just takes whatever they see right away as the truth without doing research.
If you get your medical advice from the comments section, you should try to find it somewhere else.
Right.
True,
Right.
true, true.
Yeah.
All right,
Shout
all
out to
right.
Lily.
Oh, I had a real quick question. Like I heard recently, of course, I don't know where I heard it from, that there's a pill that you take that, or they're coming up with a pill, somebody, and it's you take it for 5 days and it cures COVID. How true is that? Or is that even a thing? Like, and I think I seen it on Facebook, so I was just like taking a mental note so that I can ask a doctor on KOVIKI Talk.
Okay, so I had this question about 3 weeks ago,
Uh-huh.
because somebody was asking about Merck. Like there's a couple of Merck drugs,
Right.
and so I haven't seen anything about a pill form.
Okay.
The remdesivir was supposed to be touted as like the cure-all for COVID. But it's an intravenous medication. It's it's hard to say if it's doing anything. We use it now. I don't know how it became standard care for critically ill COVID, but I think at critically ill COVID, we just throw the kitchen sink.
Yeah.
But there's nothing that really says remdesivir has like done a lot to cure COVID. And so after remdesivir, there's another IV medication. I think it starts with an M, but it's in phase 3. And their initial phases were very promising, but so was remdesivir. Like everything can look good in the beginning, but it isn't until you actually get to use it to see how good it is. As far as an oral medication coming out, I haven't seen anything that has any traction. And for it to have any traction, it has to be on the FDA radar now, right? Like and I haven't seen anything. I don't know, Dr. Joe, have you seen anything?
No, actually,
Okay.
not really.
Misinformation. See?
It's
See how we clear that up?
no. I think there's a lot of. I think one of the things we have to realize is even with a good study that comes out, us in the healthcare field usually argue about it because we cannot come up with a perfect study. And unfortunately, when we argue about the same paper, which both valid points, people will get a hold of it, and kind of, saying that it's not a good study and things like that. Unfortunately, but not to my mind that it's a good one. I heard about the Merck PO that is coming out, but I think it's not even close to prime time yet. But I've heard they're coming out with that.
So is it safe to say that right now the one thing that will protect you is the vaccine? That like I haven't heard of anything else other than the vaccine and taking good care of yourself and being safe, of course.
Absolutely, the vaccine, the number one, foremost number one uh, therapy that we have now that can protect you. Um, but if you happen to get COVID, the only other validated medication that everybody seems to use for severe COVID is steroids. Other drugs, remdesivir, are good for some folks, but there are some side effects, some renal failure that is
Mhm.
associated with it. So we have to use it carefully. There's some combo monoclonal antibodies that I
Mhm.
think it's available now. Regeneron is the one that is actually approved now, and it's been that we use for minor COVID patients that would likely to be transitioned into severe COVID, and those patients we give Regeneron, and that's why all these major cities have these infusion centers. And I'm not sure about other states, but here in Texas, if you're unable to make it into an infusion center, there's a mobile infusion van that comes to your house and administer it
Mm.
to you guys. So I think in that sense, it's helping our cases now help the moderate COVID stay moderate and not transition into severe COVID.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So did we cover everything? Because I was listening on my way in, but Robert, is there anything you'd like to get out before we let you go? We've got everything. Is there a website we can lead people to?
Uh, they just changed the people that handles the intakes and the screening process for the COVID hotels. So that is just changed last week. So now, before it was the Access Line, now it's Aloha United Way. So if you want to get into if you want some information, and you're in Hawaii about quarantine hotels, just call 211, and there should be somebody there to guide you, because that's
Mhm.
the Aloha United Way helpline, help hotline. So yeah,
211. Awesome.
211.
Nice and easy. 211.
I
Dr.
think
Samoa?
there's a comment on the is the booster that is being given to those who've had the vaccination necessary. I think that's, and I think the boosters. I've yet to get my booster, but I'm too. I wanted to get it already, but I'm just being busy and not being able to make it to the clinic. But the booster is actually it's just for some folks now. So you have to meet certain um,
Like a
criteria,
compromised immune system.
and then those who are actually the healthcare workers
Right.
who are high risk of getting COVID. So, um, but I would encourage everybody else, if you meet those criteria, please make your way to get the vaccine, the booster.
Yeah, I think the natural history of COVID it's still being determined.
Right.
So immunity against it, we don't know how long it lasts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just got my booster last week,
Oh, nice.
and so it's like you said,
And you
you
look
don't know.
fine. You don't have an extra eyeball or anything, so
Nope.
you look
Nope.
great.
Thank
It's
you.
There
it's
you go, people. Get your booster. Get your
Get your
booster.
booster.
Get your booster. Well, we went past an hour, but that's because I was late and I had a million questions. But I appreciate your time, Robert and Dr. Joe and Dr. Samoa. Thank you so much. The information that you gave, I always learn something new every time we have our people that look like us, our doctors and educators and CBOs that look like us, because that's who we listen to. So we appreciate your time. Thank you. And I'm sure we're going to ask you on again. So look for my emails. We're here every Monday. At 5-ish, depending, it's supposed to be 5 o'clock. Every Monday at 5 o'clock, KOVIKI Talk. We will see you next Monday. Don't be late. And you can catch us on YouTube and come back here if you've missed any part of the show. We'll be right here. So we'll see you next week. Thank you.